going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Kevin Jackowitz. Welcome to the Kaged Review, and this is my revisited review for Spider-Man Far From Home. Directed by John Watts. You have Tom Holland coming back as Peter Parker Spider-Man. You have Samuel L. Jackson returning as Nick Fury. Colby Smulders as Maria Hill. Jon Favreau comes back in as Happy Hogan. Marissa Tomei reprises her role as May Parker. You have Zendaya coming back as Michelle. And we're going to touch on that in a second. Jacob Batalon comes back as Ned Leeds, his best friend. And you have Jake Gyllenhaal being introduced as Quentin Beck or Mysterio. And so there are things that I really like about this movie a lot more than the first Spider-Man movie. And things that I really like about the Spider-Man Homecoming movie that I really like more than Far From Home. And I think the first and foremost thing that I like better from Homecoming is the villain. They really fleshed out the Vulture's character a lot more. You got more of his backstory and why he became who he was. But then you also had the emotional connection to the fact that the girl that Spider-Man was interested in, he just happened to be her father. And you didn't find that out until like halfway through the movie. And then when it dawns on Adrian Toomes that Peter Parker actually is Spider-Man, you had a great scene there in the car. And that was kind of a gravity that this movie did not have. Now they did up the effects and the action was a lot more intense in this one. And the CGI, the special visual effects were very cool. And I loved Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio. I just wish they would have fleshed him out a bit more. They did take some liberties with him, but you finally got Mysterio on screen. And when you first meet Mysterio, it's the Mysterio we all know and love from the comic books. He's this guy from another world, and he's got all these magical powers. And it's on full display in the movie. And so you do kind of get to nerd out in that way. They really nailed Mysterio. And then they kind of changed him up, but still nailed him. And I'll get into that. So you have the whole world is mourning Iron Man, and you have all these people that have come back after Thanos snapped his fingers, and they're all trying to cope with what they're calling the blip, which is these people that disappeared. And they're talking about how it's affected people. You know, half the world has moved on and are now 5 years older, and the other half are kind of right where they were when they left. And so it causes a bit of confusion in some ways. Spider-Man is going on a school field trip. And I think they are going to Italy. I'm not entirely sure where it was. But whatever the case, Nick Fury is trying to get a hold of Spider-Man through Happy Hogan. And Spider-Man doesn't really want to deal with any of that right now. He wants to be a kid. He wants to go on this school trip and not worry about it. Well, Nick Fury follows Peter Parker to Italy or wherever it was they went, and he enlists them to help out Quentin Beck, who is posing as this really great guy who is fighting off the elementals. The elementals are 4 creatures born from earth, water, fire, and I think wind. And he's trying to save the planet from these elementals and, you know, building up how he's a hero. What you find out about halfway through the movie is that the elementals were completely fake. And they were created with very sophisticated visual effects through drones, and drones that have pretty heavy firepower, which is what causes the physical damage that these holograms were making. And so you had the holograms and these guns on these drones that were being covered by this mirage. And so it looked like you had these big gigantic beasts that were causing legitimate damage. And the reason Quentin Beck is doing this is because he's kind of a jaded ex-employee of Tony Stark, Iron Man. And they did a flashback to Captain America Civil War where Tony Stark was talking about that BARF program he created. And it was actually Quentin Beck's technology that made that possible. And so he was really pissed off. And then he got fired not long after that from Stark Industries. And so him and a bunch of ex-employees from Stark and, you know, other areas decided to create Mysterio. And the master plan here was originally to take out Spider-Man, but of course that doesn't work. And once Spider-Man learns of the deception from Mysterio, Quentin Beck uses these drones to create these really cool sequences in the movie where it's like just hallucinations, like just bombarding Peter Parker with these visual things that are going on that, you know, would be like a really bad trip. But the way they did it in the movie looked very, very awesome. It was very well done. So at the end of the whole scenario, Spider-Man has to use his like spidey senses to figure out where Quentin Beck actually is. And so he takes out Quentin Beck. And then we learn the master plan wasn't just to take out Spider-Man. He had a backup plan. We'll get to that in a second too. There was kind of like a love story going on with Happy Hogan and May Parker, which didn't really do anything for me, if I'm being honest. It was just awkward. Zendaya, you know, he has these affections for Michelle, and she has the affections for him, you can tell. And they finally voice those to each other by the end of the movie. But then she's like, you know, she like pretty much guesses that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. She's like, I pay attention. But then at one point in the movie, she's like, my friends call me MJ. And I was like, that's where you lost me. Just leave MJ the fuck alone and let Zendaya be her own character. And they didn't do that. They tried to make her MJ. You lost me on that one, honestly. One thing they also go kind of overboard with was Ned Leeds, you know, the best friend of Peter Parker, the big guy. He's just annoying. Like, if I had a friend like this, he wouldn't be my friend. I'd kick his ass to the curb and tell him to go about his business. And I think in any realistic situation, that's what would happen. This guy is just kind of an asshole. And he gets way too involved in Peter Parker's life. And it doesn't make sense, and it's not realistic. So that was one gripe I had with the movie, too. So then you get the big mid-credit scene where you find out that Quentin Beck, before he gets killed, sets up a bunch of scenes from Spider-Man, so it looks like he was the one that helped create these battles with the elementals, and it was actually Peter Parker who was the bad guy. And then he tells everybody through a video feed in Times Square that it was Peter Parker who is Spider-Man. And so they kind of reveal his identity to everybody at the same time that he's making him look like the bad guy. And I thought that was really, really cool. I thought that was very, very well done. So it really does kind of make me excited for the next Spider-Man. Now you're going to have kind of pretty much the city against him, which is kind of the way it's always been in the comics. So I thought that was a nice touch to it. Overall, I had a lot of fun with the movie. Thought it was very well done. There was one big part of exposition when you finally learn that Mysterio is actually Quentin Beck with a bunch of holograms and drones. And that's where they kind of have to explain everything that happened and why certain people are like building up to try to sabotage anything that Tony Stark did, which Spider-Man being one of those things. And so, you know, it was a lot of exposition, but, you know, again, Jake Gyllenhaal kind of saves that because he is a phenomenal actor, and it looked like he had a lot of fun in this role, to be very fair. So, Spider-Man Far From Home, I'm going to give an 8 out of 10. It was a very, very good movie. There were certain problems that I mentioned in there, but it was a great time. Honestly, I loved it. So that's where I'm at, 8 out of 10. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button, subscribe, and share. My name is Kevin Jackowitz, Kaged Nation, out.